Okay, and welcome to day 2 of Git. We're going to be doing some more cloning, committing, syncing. I really want to kind of dive into what the actual workflows look like. Yesterday, we kind of went over everything all at once, just to get that feel for the terminal, try to see if there's any bugs we could work out. It kind of went a little long. So again, we waived the points on yesterday's assignment. So I do encourage you to use that for practice. But keep in mind, we will be getting a little bit more practice today as well. We won't have to worry about branching yet. It's mostly going to be focused on initializing repos, cloning repos, and performing the ACP process. I'll get my screen share going. Okay, and I'm just going to dive right into this. I'm going to open up a terminal. I'm going to use it to create a new folder. You can create your folders using your graphical interface by right-clicking and hitting new and new folder still if you want. But if you want to use the practice with the terminal, feel free to do that as well whenever you're creating your new projects. And I'm just going to kind of go into the workflow as if we were creating a project locally first and then decided we want to move this project to GitHub. So this is a scenario you might run into where you're kind of tinkering around on your computer. You're not sure if you want to share this code yet. And then later you decide that you do want to share this code. So I'll show you that workflow first. And then I'll show you the workflow I use for whenever I know that I'm going to have a project that's going to be on GitHub. And I'll show you how I would approach that scenario as well. That way you're feeling more comfortable with these different approaches. So first I'm going to open up my terminal and I'm just going to create a new folder. And to do that, I'm going to say mkdir, and the name of the folder will be demo11-14. And then I will navigate into that folder using cd. That's demo11-14. So my terminal is now, if I print working directory, my terminal is now located inside of that folder. So from here, I can create new files, but I'm going to start using VS Code at this point. I could use the touch command in the terminal if I wanted to save a lot of workflows, but I prefer to create my files through VS Code and use the graphical interface. Yes, Omar, you have a question?
Just wanted to say, can you please zoom in a little bit?
I had a feeling that's what you were going to say.
I'm sorry about that, but
No, you're good.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm glad you reminded me. So thank you for that. I'll try to keep an eye on my font sizes and stuff here.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to open up a new VS Code. And then I'll use my VS Code to navigate to that folder. And for anyone using Mac, we were working on this yesterday, and we discovered that the best way to access your terminal on Mac is using the integrated terminal inside of VS Code. So once you navigate to your project, you could then open up a terminal inside of that project, and the terminal will automatically have your parent, your working directory located in your project. And what that would look like is you'd hit the terminal button here and go to new terminal. For me, my default terminal is PowerShell. I don't want to use PowerShell for trying to do bash commands. Some of them don't work, and I'm not sure if I have Git installed. It looks like I have 2.42, so I could use my Git commands here. So if you do want to use your integrated terminal, check to make sure first that you have Git installed in that terminal. Otherwise, you may have to hit this drop down and then select Git bash to open your Git bash terminal inside of your VS Code that way. If you're on Mac, you should have everything set up by default to where you can use this terminal and it already be set to your current folder. I'm going to continue to use the external terminal just because I don't like taking up all this extra space on my screen while I'm working on a smaller screen for the presentation. I do commonly use this terminal, especially if I'm working in like Python or if I'm just trying to quickly get through Git commands like that. But for the presentation, I'm going to close it just so I keep that screen space available. Okay, so I'm going to start by creating a new file. And the first file I want to create is my index.html. I'm just going to kind of go through this workflow like I'm building a web page. I'll add in my HTML and just say sample page is my title and put it in H1 with the hello world. Okay, so I created this page. This is, I put a whole lot of content in there, speaking like, hypothetically, if I were to have this whole thing built out and decided I now want to share this to GitHub. So at this point, I would open up my terminal. And I want to make sure that my terminal is in the correct folder. I can do that with pwd. I can also see it here, that it is in the correct folder. But if you don't have that, you'll have to use pwd to see your current folder this way instead. Every terminal is probably going to look different across different computers, depending on what operating system you're using, what version of Windows you're using. You might get different colors and a little bit different behavior inside of your terminal. But the commands are all the same, and so that's the important takeaway with this. So to create a new Git repository, and again, this is a local repository still. We haven't got to moving this to GitHub yet. To create, just to get this to say that I want to use my version control system, I want to track this code, you use git init, and this means you're going to initialize a new Git repository. Whenever that happens, it actually creates a new folder, and we can see that listed in this command output right here. It says initialized empty Git repository. It gives my folder location, but it also says /.git. So when I do ls, you're not going to see that folder there. But if I do ls space and I put the A flag on it for all, we can see the hidden files and folders, and we can see that there's a Git folder located inside of my project folder. And that's where all of your Git history is going to be saved. There isn't too many reasons that you'll ever actually need to access this folder other than maybe seeing that it exists. Sometimes you'll run into some issues where Git's not behaving properly and it's saying that you're not in a Git repository, or you see that you're on a branch and you shouldn't be on a branch. Perhaps you accidentally initialized a Git repository in the wrong location. Just something to keep in mind. This folder does get created when you initialize a new one. And as soon as your terminal detects this folder, it's going to show you a branch name, as long as the branch is inside of this folder. It should be when you initialize a new one. If you were to manually create a .git folder, it wouldn't actually find the required files. You have to use the command git init in order to get that started. So that's step one, is just creating the local repository. The next step is actually creating a repo on GitHub. Typically, when I create a repo on GitHub, I look at my project folder name here inside of my VS Code Explorer, and I see it's called demo 11-14. So this is normally the name of the repo that I want to create. It doesn't have to be the same. The reason I make them the same, though, is because it's easier to keep track of your remote repo and your local repo together if they have the same name. So I'm going to open up a browser tab. And I'm going to go to GitHub and start this new repository. I have a new button here I can click to create a new one. I can also click this plus button here to create a new one. Or I can go to my profile, your repositories, and I can get the new button here as well. So there's lots of ways to create a new one. Just try to find what works for you as far as creating that new repository. If you just want to click the new button on the home page, click this plus sign and click new repository. Any approach is fine, just as long as you're creating a new repository. And again, I want to use the same name as my local folder. So if I look in my terminal, I can get that again. I see it's demo 11-14. And I'm just going to copy that out of here so I don't make any typos and paste that in right there. For the description, it says this is optional. I do advise that you add a description for repositories, not because it's something you might need. It's mainly for describing the code for potential employers looking at your GitHub. You'll see employers will actually go into your GitHub whenever you're interviewing to see what kind of things you're building, what kind of code you use. Are you adding documentation? what do your commit messages look like, and also to see if you're collaborating with other developers could be an option too. So like using that first contribution to get started with that type of where you collaborate with other developers. Having something like that in there is helpful. They do look at that type of stuff. So all I want to do is create this repo, and I want to make it public. And at this time, I'm not going to add a README file. I'm just going to create this with a blank template. So I'm not actually going to select the template from up here, but I'm just going to put in a name, and I'm not going to change anything else. Keep in mind, if you set this to private, the TAs will not be able to view your repo for grading. So make sure you remain public on your how you want this repository to be viewed. So I'm not picking a README, I'm not adding a .gitignore, and I'm not adding a license. I'm just going to create the repository. When you create a fully empty repository, you'll get a little bit different screen than normal. If you remember on the other repositories, you had these tabs up here, but you had like a green button here that said code. Everything just kind of looks different now. And then this is giving us some instructions here. It's like, what do you want to do now? You created your repository. We're looking at push an existing repository from the command line. So this is how you'll actually link your local repository to your GitHub repository.
Here, I'm going to show you how to put $6,400 in.
So I'm going to copy this code block by clicking right here. And I'm going to go into my terminal and just paste this in. And when I press enter, we can see the commands that are going to happen here. It says git remote add origin, and it has the HTTPS link to my repo. What origin is referring to is actually this link. Oops. So I'm actually going to highlight just this link here so we can see what I'm talking about. Let's have to use my mouse to highlight. So this link right here is being assigned to a variable called origin. So anytime you see the word origin, it is actually referring to this link. And then whenever you see main, as of right here, it's referring to your current branch. So I'm just going to press enter. And sometimes you'll see these kind of issues where you see that main does not match any. What this is referring to is it couldn't find the main branch. That doesn't mean that it failed. It's because the main branch already exists. So if I were to, let me just get status real quick. We can see that I haven't committed my changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to say git add period, git commit -m. And whenever you only create a file just to get started, you would just say initial commit. If you build out your project, though, you're going to want to have multiple commits explaining each step that you took to get to that point. And now if I do a git push origin main, because I had pasted this in, it linked it up, even though it looked like it was throwing an error. It's just because the new branch already existed. If I wanted to be a little more picky with the command, I would have just grabbed this top one here. What this is doing is actually creating the main branch and pushing the main branch to a branch that already doesn't exist. So we've seen that error message. It's okay, just grab the whole thing and paste it in. It's not a big deal. It doesn't hurt anything to have that error message. If you wanted to initialize a new repo, so when we first started, I did the git init. You could skip that step technically and come here and grab this command. And what this command does is first it creates a README file. And this little echo command is a bash command that adds content. So it's going to add a h1 heading to the README file. And then it's going to perform the git init. And then it's going to add the README file. It's going to commit the README file. It's going to create the main branch. It's going to add the remote repository, and then it's going to push everything to main. So it would do pretty much the same thing. I could have copied and pasted this one in as well, but I think the git init would have actually stopped the rest of these from running. So I always pick the bottom one whenever I already have a repository created. And that's the main steps to getting this started. So I pushed everything to main. I actually did the full ACP. I did git add period. I did the git commit, and then I did a git push origin main. So now if I refresh my GitHub page, I should see that file here. And here we have the index.html pushed into GitHub. So this workflow, it's not my favorite workflow. I don't like to create my local repos first and then work and then create my GitHub and then pull link them together. I feel like it's error prone. I don't like seeing that red message in my terminal where failed to push some refs because the branch already existed. It's not my favorite way to do it. So I'm going to show you the way that I do prefer to create new Git repositories and just kind of go through this workflow. So the first thing I would do is I go to my little drop down here to create a new repository. Notice I'm not creating anything on my local machine yet. I'm starting on GitHub. And the difference would be before I came into here, I created a new folder in my terminal. I created a file and I got started that way. I haven't created any new folders yet. I haven't created anything. I'm going to start with GitHub by creating a new repository on GitHub. So once you create your repository, you're going to give it a name. And I'm just going to call this one a cool web page, just a sample name. I'm going to delete this later. So a cool web page is going to be created. And this is a web page that is pretty cool. This time I'm going to add the README file. And if you want to add a license, add a MIT. This is optional. You don't have to do this. What this will do is create a file, and I'll show you what's in this file just in case you're interested in this approach. It basically means that anybody is allowed to copy your code and use it for educational purposes, and that you're not actually holding on to the rights to your code. And this is a common practice for open source. It allows other developers to come in, copy what you did, modify it, and then maybe even push changes back into your code base and help you improve. So it's not a bad thing to have an MIT license. A .git ignore is something we'll get into a little bit later. But if you ever do want to just include one, you will select node from this list. We'll get into this again later. This is an optional thing you can do. It's something that I typically do when I'm creating repos automatically now. And again, I'll get in what that actually does at a later time. So I'm going to create my repository. And all this is a web page with 3 files. It has a README file, a license, and a .git ignore. So what I'm going to do now is hit the code. I'm going to grab the link out of here, and I'm just going to clone this down. So in order for me to clone this down, I need to get into my projects folder. So I can cd ... to go back, or I could just open a new terminal in that folder. So let me just close this terminal. I have an extra one open there too. I'm going to open up my folders again. I'm going to open a new git bash in this folder just to show you that I'm in the projects folder, pwd just to confirm, and I'm going to git clone that link down. So I'm going to say git clone and just paste that in. So we can see the link is showing a cool web page. And notice I'm doing this directly in my projects folder. I haven't created a new folder. And the reason I don't create a new folder is because when you create a repository, it is creating a folder for you. So if I created another folder, I would have a folder nested inside of a folder. That's probably fine for learning Git, but it's not good practice when you actually start building web applications. And I'll show why that's not good practice. Let me clone this in. Okay, so I have the new folder, a cool web page. So let me find that in here. And I'm going to open my VS Code to this folder. So we'll go File, Open Folder, a cool web page, select. Okay, so now to show you why it's not good practice to create a folder ahead of time. If I were to have this is what it would look like, a cool web page. And then all of my files would be inside of this folder. So this is my root folder right now, and this is where my project is. If I create an index.html right here, and I start some content, and I'm going to go live. And when I went live, it worked because I'm already in this folder. But typically, I would have to select that folder. They're kind of smart with the way they did this. It'll go on whatever file I currently have selected. But if I were to open my live server up immediately, I would actually have to click on the index.html or the next folder, and there'd be a list of folders here. Let me see if I can get that to work by opening and closing, just to show you. But the point is, my index is no longer, oh, sorry, it's not even in my, here we go. Now it's in there. That's why it was actually working correctly. Let me try this again. All right, so that we get this error here, cannot get index.html. Whenever I would go like this is what I was talking about. So because my index is not in my root directory, which is what this slash is symbolizing, I'll have to click on this page. But as I was saying, if you select the file and then go live, like you actually have it highlighted, oftentimes it'll go straight to it that way. And we can see the folder nested there and the index.html. Another way to do it would be to right click on it, and we could open with live server here. There it is. And that would work the same way. But the problem isn't for local development. The problem is when we actually send this website to be a published website. The tools used to do that are looking for an index.html that lives inside of your root file, root folder. So whenever you create a folder and then you clone this down, you're essentially nesting two folders. And you can see we have two folders here with the same name. So what I would have to do is actually just move all of these out of here. And let me just select all them and pull them out. And then I can delete this extra folder. So it just creates an extra step that's unnecessary. And also the .get folder was living inside of our root folder here too. So that's something also to keep in mind. So this is the MIT license file. It just permission is hereby granted free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of the software. It allows your software to be open source, and it's considered to be good for educational purposes. So just something that's not a bad idea to add. You don't have to if you don't want to. It doesn't really matter. If you don't include a license, then technically you're the intellectual property owner or something along them lines. I'm not too familiar with the legal jargon. I just know that if you wanted to make your software more secure, then you don't put the license in there. Are there any questions so far about these workflows and how we would do this? How we'd create new projects? Okay, so since I created a new file here, we can see that little U showing up right there. That's telling us that we have an untracked change or an untracked file. So I'm going to go through the ACP process. Would anyone like to walk me through how I would do this?
You would do get, add, comma, or add dot.
Yeah, it'd be a dot. I can also type in the file name if I wanted to, because since it's the only file, the dot's quicker, so I usually just do that. And remember, that will add every single untracked file that's in your current directory. So if you're in the projects folder, which actually that's a problem because we're in the wrong folder. So first thing I need to do is cd into a cool web page. Notice I don't have the main right there. I'll actually show you what happens if I try to add right here. Get add period. If you see this fatal, not a get repository or any of the parent directories, what that means is this will actually search projects, it'll search OneDrive, it'll search root, it looks for everywhere to find that .git folder. It doesn't currently exist. If you see this and you know you cloned your code down, that means you're probably in the wrong folder. That doesn't mean to run git init at this time, because whenever you clone a repository down, that will initialize the project for you. So first I'm going to cd into a cool web page. I use the tab key to autocomplete that. All right, so we'll go back to your instructions, git add period, and this will add the file to staging, and we can confirm that it's staged for commit by using git status. You don't have to do the git status. I just wanted to show you that it is now staged and ready to be committed. You want to stage your files prior to committing. It's kind of like a safety net so that you don't accidentally commit things you're not ready to commit. And that's where you would use individual adds. So what would be the next step? Would anyone like to take a shot?
Now we need to commit.
Exactly. And what was the command for commit?
If I remember correctly, that's git commit, and then the file name.
It's not the file name, because it's going to commit everything that's currently staged.
Okay.
The only time you need to use the file name is when you're adding. So for committing, there's actually a flag we put in. This flag is required for commits.
Dash M.
Yeah, it's the M flag so that we can apply a message to it.
Okay. Yeah. And then message here,
yeah.
in the apostrophe.
Yeah, so then we need to put quotes, and the message will go within the quotes. And I would say something very specific, something that makes sense, something that other developers would understand. Create index file with H1 heading. That's a very specific. It's also concise. You don't want to go like write a book here. You want to be as short as you can, but as specific as you can. So create index file with H1 heading. Something to add here. This is something you're going to see split on the community. It's actually a 50-50 split according to Stack Overflow. My message is currently in the present tense. Oops. I didn't say created index file with H1 heading. I said create index file with H1 heading. And that's on purpose because the GitHub documentation says that commit messages should be in the present tense. If you look on the Stack Overflow surveys, it says GitHub's stupid and they should be in past tense, because why would you do it in the present tense? And there's actually a 50-50 split on what the community thinks is correct. So whichever one you think is better, just go ahead and do that. If you want to say created index file, you can say created. The reason I'm saying create is just because that's what the documentation says. So that's what I follow. But again, you don't have to follow the present tense rule. I just wanted to make that known that not everything we do is written in stone. There are more than one ways to do it. And this is one of those little things. So I'm going to send this message now. Okay, so our commit is complete. What do I have to do now? Are we done?
Need to push it.
I've got to push it. So if I were only working locally, at this point, I would be done. I created a save point. I created an index point, as you will. Like I could come back to this point and revert all of my code to this point in time. But we need to get our code updated onto GitHub. And to do that, we do git push. Typically, when you're on your main branch, you can stop at this point and send this. I don't like doing this because if you're working on multiple branches, this will throw errors later on. So it is better practice to tell it where you're pushing it to. And we're pushing it to origin, which again, this is a variable that contains the link that you're pushing your code to. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to know what it means. I just want to give you some context behind it. Just put the word origin there and this will work. And then the last thing you need to put is the branch name. So git push origin main. We send it, and away goes our code to GitHub. And we can see to HTTPS, there's where it's sent to, and then here we can see the branch name. So let's check it out on GitHub. I'll do a quick refresh. Right now we have 3 files. My last commits were 12 minutes ago. Let me refresh. And I have an index.html, and I can see my commit message, create index file with one h1 heading. Also, I can click on this, and I can see exactly what lines of code were created during that commit. So GitHub's a really powerful tool for collaboration, especially if I needed approval before allowing this code to be pushed into GitHub. If you're working with a large group of people, whenever you push your code to GitHub, other developers are actually going to come and look at your commit messages. They're going to say, okay, you created an index file with an h1 heading. Let's take a look. And they're going to say, okay, I see a lot of boilerplate code here. Here's the h1. This looks good. I don't see anything that's not syntactically correct. If there was an issue, you can actually leave comments right here on GitHub. I could say, I do not see a header. This needs fixed. And then I'm just going to comment that directly on there, assuming that I'm working with another developer for this. So this is something that they can do, and then they would receive a notification that there was a comment added on their commit, and they can come in and look at it and say, okay, I'm going to fix this. So to fix this, I'm actually going to do this directly on GitHub now, and I want to show you this because this is going to happen when you're working with other developers. Changes will happen. Changes will get pushed to GitHub, but they're not going to be pushed to your local machine. So if you think about this, if you were working on this project with me and you pushed your changes to GitHub, you didn't push it to my local computer. You only pushed it to GitHub. So I don't have your code. So I'll show you how to deal with that. You could technically delete your entire repo and then clone it back down again. That there is a better way to do it. So let's go into index. I'm going to make this change. I'm going to click the edit button. And I'm just going to manually code this out without the IDE to assist me. I guess I do get some assistance with this now. It's a nice touch. Let's see if I can. Cool. So we can now commit changes here directly. And I'm going to get an option for this. I could say, this is my commit message. It just says update index.html. This is where you would put in your actual commit message. So I would say add header around h1. Also notice GitHub gave me this commit message in present tense. I just want to point that out, that you're going to see a mixture of past tense and present tense if you pick one way or the other. But also do whatever your other coworkers are doing when you're working in the industry. So if they're all using past tense, then use past tense as well. So we also get an option here for create a new branch for commit and start pull request. This is what you would do if you were working with a group of people and you didn't want to make changes directly to your production code. We don't have to worry about this, but if you do this, it'll actually create a new branch called patch. And then as soon as you merge it in, you can delete that branch. But again, we're just going to commit directly to the main branch. We're not worried about branching. So I commit that in. And we can see the changes, header here, and we have our h1 wrapped. Everything looks good, except it's not good here. So in order to get my code updated, I'm going to open up my terminal. And this is a good practice to do whenever you're working with a group and you don't know if somebody pushed changes to GitHub. You just turned on your computer, you didn't open up your GitHub, you opened up your code, you just want to get to work. The first thing you do is you type in git pull. And that's all you have to put is git pull. If you put git pull origin main, this is okay too. It's going to say that you're pulling the main branch. Git pull is sufficient though. So I'll put that. And now I have the header wrapped around my h1. Also, I didn't have to do any commits because these commits were already made. All I'm doing is updating my code. We also see this thing here that says fast forward. This is referring to how it merged the code in. If I were to do this, let's say I make I'm going to make another change. I just want to show you what happens. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to remove the word world here, and I'll commit that change. Remove world from heading. And I'll put that in quotes. I'll commit that. And I'm going to pull this change down, but before I do, I'm actually going to make a change locally here. And I don't want this to say hello world. I want to say hello Steve. And now I'm going to pull it down. Git pull. Because I didn't commit, it's giving me this error here. So I got to commit first. So to commit, I'm going to follow the normal workflow. Git add period. Git commit. I got a capital C there. Commit -m. Put in my message. Remove world. Add Steve. Okay, now I'm going to git pull. And this is called a merge conflict. I don't have the fast forward merge. It doesn't know what to do because there were multiple changes. These things happen. You'll probably run into this a couple times whenever you're modifying your code directly on GitHub, and then you modify your code locally, and then you try to merge everything together. You'll see something that looks like this. And I just wanted to show you this interface because it's going to happen eventually. It's not a bad thing, especially when you're working with a large group. They're inevitable. What this means is I committed to a change here on GitHub, and I committed to a change here locally. And now I have some options. What this is showing me is this is what's coming from GitHub, and this is what I currently have locally. And it's telling me to choose which one do I want. One thing you can do is you can delete all these extra things and delete the extra code. I could say, I could click on this little text here that says accept current change. Let me zoom in. My text is like really small today. I could say accept current change. These are kind of hard to see. They're kind of faded out. I know a lot of people don't notice them. But if I click on accept current change, if you look here, this is my current change. It'll actually save all of this code and it will delete all of this code. It's using these symbols to determine the difference between the two. I'm not expecting anyone to be able to like fully handle merge conflicts today. I just want to show you the interface in case this happens to you, just for some clarification here, because eventually it will. And we will get into merge conflicts when we get into level 2 of GitHub. So I could say accept current change, or I could say accept incoming change. My incoming change is down here. If I accept the incoming change, it will delete all of this and keep this. I could accept both changes, which will keep this header and this header both, or I could compare changes. The next thing I can do is I have this big green button here that says resolve and merge editor. So this is normally what I do whenever I have a merge conflict, is I click this button first. And it gives me, this can get really confusing the first time you see it, but it's giving me my incoming change on the left. It's giving me my current change on the right. And then down here is the result. So depending on what I choose, the result is going to be affected. So if I start messing with the code up here, I can't type, I can't do anything here, but if I were to hit accept incoming, it would modify all of my result. And if I hit accept current, it would modify my result down here. But I can modify my result. I could make like a hybrid version. I could say like, and Steve. And then I could click complete merge at this point, and it won't accept either of these. It'll just have its own version of it. Again, this isn't the most important thing. I just wanted you to be familiar with the interface. So I'm going to click accept incoming, and we can see that it modified my incoming down here. And then I'm just going to click complete merge. This takes me to another interface. This is something that you can use for your ACP. I recommend using the terminal at this point, though, because if you start using the interface here, then whenever you need to do more complicated things using the terminal, you're not going to be comfortable with it. So I'm just going to click back into my Explorer. And then I'm going to go into here. Now, if I do git status at this time, we're going to see that I have some changes here. We already have a file that's staged. It just needs to be committed. So I'm going to say git commit -m, and I'm just going to say resolve merge conflict. And again, you don't have to be proficient at resolving merge conflicts yet. I just wanted you to be familiar with what the concept is in the interface and why they would happen. And then once it's resolved, I can push git push origin main. Remember, anytime you commit, the next step is to push. Okay, so that is everything about merge conflicts that I'm going to cover today. Again, I just wanted you to see that interface. I'll show it a couple more times this week just to kind of remind you of what it is and how it works. So has everyone been able to get their terminals working? I just want to make sure that we don't have anybody who's feeling left behind right now because maybe your terminal's not set up correctly or you're not able to understand or get the commands to work. Are there anyone having any sort of issues? What questions do you have at this time? Okay, so no questions yet.
Yeah, no question, but so far I think I'm good. I'm just giving you my feedback. No one else is speaking, so. Well, I was trying to follow along when you were initially doing it, when you got a error message in your terminal. I had a kind of same message there. It says when I was trying to push it, it said remote origin already exists. Everything is up to date. Branch means set up to track. That's what I got. I don't know if that was a success or a failure for the push.
That sounds like a success. Did you grab a code block from GitHub?
Yeah, I was trying to follow you the way you copied it. So what I gave it, hold on a second. Let me open my. Yeah, so when we created the repository, let me go back. So the second block, yes,
Yeah.
this one, I copied this one from here, and I pasted in the push center, push area, and then I pushed it. And that's the message I got in my terminal, which I just told you.
Yeah, so that's completely normal if you copy the whole block. I usually do copy the whole block just because it's easier than highlighting just this one line. Like sometimes I'll be doing stuff like this. The error message doesn't affect anything.
Okay.
So I usually just click this button and paste it in. It'll still work the same.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I'm saying so that was a success. It pushed it.
Yeah. If you don't want to see error messages, then you only have to put in this line.
The first line. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and that's only if you have an existing repository set up locally. And I'm going to go through these workflows again. I just want to make sure everyone's really comfortable with the workflow because it is important to understand how this this part here works. Typically, I like to create my repos prior. So right now I have a repo here, but I don't have any sort of code local. What I could do is actually copy this block just to kind of show what I would do in that case. I created my repo, but I didn't create a README file. And I don't have anything created locally. So I'm not able to clone my code now because I didn't create a README file. So if you run into this situation, then you want to use the top block because this is a new repository. So if I click this, this time I need to create a folder because cloning will create the folder for me, but I don't have a folder to clone with. So I'm going to go to my folders and I'm going to create a new folder here. And I want to name this the same as my repo. And I think I called it a test or something like that. Test repo. I could use this name test or a test. It would still work the same. I like it to be the same just so when I'm looking for the repo itself, I might go on GitHub, look at my repo, and then come local and be like, okay, where'd I download that to? I would expect it to be the same because anytime you clone a repo, it has the same name as your repo. All right, so there's my test repo. So I'm going to copy that little block of code, and then I'm going to cd into that. So I'll do cd / test repo. So now I'm in the test repo folder. If I do pwd, I can see test repo is my current directory here. And I'm going to paste in that big code block now. Oh, and I copied and pasted test repo there. Let me try this again. And then paste that in. And I'm just going to press enter. And this way I did not receive any error messages because this branch didn't already exist. This wasn't already wired up or anything. So it actually did the whole process and it worked successfully. Let me go ahead and see if I can open this. I should be able to open the markdown file with code readme.md. My VS Code is flashing. There it is. If yours doesn't work like that, you may have to still open your VS Code manually. That's just a little shortcut. You can type in code and then the name of the file, or you can type in code and put in a period, and it will open up that folder with your VS Code like this. So something to, if you have the shortcut, that's great. If it doesn't work, it is a little bit complicated to get it set up whenever you're first installing Git. So here's the README file. This is currently what's on GitHub. Everything here is synced up. So I'm just going to add a little bit of content to this. I'm going to add an H2 and say contributors. And I'll put my name here. And I'll make this a hyphen. Okay, so I made some changes to my local repository. So I'm going to go through the ACP process and move this code to GitHub now. So I'm going to go to my terminal, and I'm going to say git add period. Sometimes I get this error message. This is because I have some other utilities installed. If you see this come up on mine, just ignore it. It's just a warning. It's not actually an error. It's not going to hurt anything. And then I'm going to say git commit -m. And I'm going to say add contributors to README. And now I need to push this code to GitHub. Git push origin main. And that's the whole process for creating a new repo, starting on GitHub. And that's if you didn't already create a folder or include a README file on your GitHub. So you can run into some differences like that. So I'm actually glad you brought that up because I was able to show what happens if you forget to do the README. If you forget to add a README file, then you'll have to use this code block here to actually start your initialization, create your folder, and work it through that way. And now if I refresh, I can see my test repo. And if you're practicing and don't want all these extra repos, I'll show you how to delete these too. To delete a repo, you have these tabs here. I'm going to go over to settings, and then I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom to what's called the danger zone. And we're going to click delete this repository. When I get to this point, I like to copy this because I'm going to have to type it in later. So I'll just hit copy that. And then I'm going to paste that in right here and click delete this repository. And it's gone. If I wanted to delete this one as well, I could say settings, go down to the danger zone, delete this repository. Keep in mind when you delete a repository, it's not deleting this off of your computer. It's only deleting this off of your GitHub. And your local repository is still wired up to this GitHub link. Once you do this, this GitHub link no longer exists. So if you wanted to put that back on GitHub, there is a little bit of work involved to make to keep all of your Git history and then push it back up. If you don't care about your Git history, you can always delete your .git folder and just initialize a new repository. So I'm just going to delete this one as well. And this way I can create new examples and go through the process a couple more times just to make sure everyone's fully good to go on this. And I'm going to delete these local as well. I'm getting an error because I have this open. And then I'll delete a cool web page. Make sure I don't have that opened here. Okay, so creating a new project. I'm going to start from scratch. If I wanted to start a new project today, I'm going to start my new assignment. I'm going to start a new project, whatever it is I'm working on. The first thing I'm going to do is just go straight to GitHub. Wrong one. I'm going to create a new repo on GitHub by clicking on the new button or clicking this drop down, new repository. And I'm going to name this today's assignment. And I have this as a public repository. I'm going to include a README file. And I'm just going to throw an MIT license on this just because that's something I like to do. And I'll leave the git ignore alone for now, just so we're not messing with extra files. Description. This is the assignment for 11/14/2023. And then I'll just hit create repository. And now that this is created, I want to clone this repository to my local machine. This is going to create the folder. It's going to have my files initialized. Everything will be wired up. I don't have to worry about copying and pasting code from GitHub to my local machine. Just copy this link. I'm going to create a new, sorry, I'm not going to create a new folder. I'm going to open my Git bash here. And I'm opening this inside of my projects folder where all of my other projects are at. And I'm going to say git clone. I'm going to paste in the link, press enter. And that will create the folder for today's assignment. So here is the folder. So I could CD into that. And then I can say code space period, and this will open my VS Code directly in that directory. Your other option would be to open a new VS Code the way you normally do, and then navigate to that folder. Projects and today's assignment, select, and there we are. I don't have any actual content in here yet. I have a README file. We do have the description listed in here. So now I could create an index.html. I'll create a styles.css. I'll create a script.js. And I'm just going to put a little bit of content in each of these. This one will have the use script at the top. My styles, I'll say select all border, or not border, sorry, border dash. I'm trying to do the border box. I forget the name of the property. Box style. Box sizing, there it is. Box sizing border box. Okay. So that way I just put a little bit of content into each file. Then my index.html, I'm going to put my boilerplate code, and I'll put a title on this and say boilerplate. I'll put an H1 with hello world. All right, so I have multiple files now. I have all kinds of different content I added into each one. So now I'm going to start the ACP process. None of this code is on my GitHub. I just did all of this work and I want to now be able to share it for submission. So first thing I'm going to do is open up my terminal. And I have a couple options here. I could do the get add period. But if I do that, I made modifications to a style sheet. I made modifications to a JavaScript file, and I made modifications to an index.html. That does make for a really messy commit message. So it wouldn't hurt to do something like index.html and then say git commit -m. And now I'm only committing my index.html at this point. I could say add content to web page. I'll just say h1 and title, just so we have a nice descriptive message there. And I could push this up to GitHub now, or I could continue adding my files. If I do git status, we can see we still have 2 untracked files, so we need to actually make sure we're working with them. Another option you have, if you don't want to have that specific of commit messages, just because you want to get through the assignment, you can always just do git add period, git commit -m, complete today's assignment. It's not the best commit message, again, but sometimes you're going to be pressed for time, and you can do something like this. I don't want to necessarily show you the wrong way. I'm just saying this happens out there, and you may have to get through a bunch of files at once. You can group them together and put some sort of commit message that kind of explains maybe the functionality that you added. So I could more specifically just say added normal boilerplate. And this does describe everything I added to every single file. So there's my add, my commit. Now I'm going to push origin name. Do I have any questions at all about Git and GitHub and this workflow that I just showed? And just to show you this worked, let me go on GitHub, refresh, and there is all the files. And we can see the 2 different commit messages, add content to web page, h1 and title, and then we just added normal boilerplate. So you can probably see why the commit message is definitely important. If I would have just said completed assignment, it wouldn't have described that I added a use strict in here. And it also wouldn't describe that I put a box sizing on my border box for all elements. What questions do you have?
I don't ever have questions till I'm trying to do the work, and they all come to me.
That's perfectly understood. You'll run into bugs at time from time dealing with Git, dealing with the terminal. As you've seen Omar, you'll get that occasional error message pop up. And interpreting them error messages is a little tricky until you get really comfortable with Git. A lot of times you'll just have to kind of think through the process and be like, okay, this is what I did. This is what it's showing. And then just kind of check, is my code pushed to GitHub? Is my code local? Is everything synced up? Do a git status? If everything's good to go on a git status, then you're probably good even if you've seen an error message. That's one of the reasons why, though, I like to avoid that workflow, creating a new repo and then copying all that code over. I like to create my repo, add a README file, and then clone it down. Cloning is my favorite way to do it. All right, so are there any questions at all about that workflow? Okay, so I'm going to start the 10-minute timer. We'll take a break. The second half, I'm going to keep it as short as possible and still get through the content. There's really not much more to show as far as how this works, this normal commit message. This way we can get into the assignment a little bit earlier today. I want everyone to try using their terminal. I want everyone to experiment with this and try to get everything working and really get this workflow down. If you want me to walk through the workflows with you one-on-one, send me a message whenever we get to that the breakout rooms, and I'll happily walk you through that step by step, the whole process, how you create the repo, clone it down, add your content, add, commit, push, everything you need to know. I can walk you through. The best thing for this is practice. Fortunately, we'll get a lot of practice because every assignment we're going to do from this point on, you're going to use this process. So definitely, if you're not comfortable with it yet, get that practice in so you can start getting comfortable in this environment. And because of that, if you do have any issues, please, please, please let me know. Because if you don't let me know, you won't be able to submit your assignments properly. Okay, so I'm going to start the 10-minute timer. And we'll get our break going, and I'll see you in 10. All right, welcome back. All right, so I just kind of want to go over how you'll complete today's assignment. I'm going to do this kind of as a group. I want to give everyone an opportunity if you wanted to work on some of your older assignments, if you need to get caught up. This could be a when we get into breakout rooms. Once you go through today's assignment, you could create a new repo and then use that new repo to start working on some of your previous assignments if you need to get caught up on some of those. Or if you just want to start converting your old projects into Git repositories for the practice, this could be an opportunity for more practice that way as well. The idea for today is to basically maximize our time and kind of get a break from all the JavaScript and everything else we've been getting stacked on us here. So I'm trying to make this week a little bit easier than most. So with that, we'll also have next week off for anyone who does need to get caught up on some other assignments. So you can use that time. We'll have the entire week off for Thanksgiving. And then the following week, we'll get back into some more JavaScript. We'll start learning DOM manipulation. I'll just kind of give you some overview of that. So I'm actually going to open up the assignment for today. There's one part in here that's a little bit confusing. You'll have to take a screenshot, and the point where you're taking the screenshot can be a little weird. So it's going to kind of go through that pull request that I showed earlier, where you do a change directly on GitHub, and then you're going to pull those changes to your remote. And then at that point, you're going to create a screenshot. So let's show that process. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new repository. Let's see what it says to call it. We want to, here's a Git cheat sheet as well. Let me show this to you. This has pretty much every Git command you could ever think of in here. It goes into a lot of really deep topics. We're barely scratching the surface on what you can do with Git. But the main thing is the ACP process. Understanding that will put you far enough ahead with Git that you'll be able to pick up a lot of these other little commands as you use the tool. You'll come to a point where you're like, I kind of need to do this. And you can just check to see what the command is to do that, because there's pretty much a command for everything. Here's one that's pretty useful, is amending your previous commits. Don't amend published commits. What this means is if you push your code to GitHub, it's a little late for that because it's creating a second copy of your commit history. So if you publish your commit and then change it locally, you're going to have a conflict whenever you go to push your code again. So that's what the cheat sheet is. It has all the different Git commands. You can read through those if you want and try to interpret what a lot of those do. That could be useful. So the commit cycle, let's see. We want to first create a new repository. Take the file. Okay, so this is from the previously forked repository. So I'm going to redo that again since I removed that repository. So to get that, I need to go back to the day one assignment. Let me open that up. And we'll go to day one. And so here's the forked repository that it's referencing. So if you haven't forked yesterday's repository, you'll need to come into the day one assignment, and you'll actually need to grab this. So the first thing we're going to do is go to this repo. And then we're going to click on the fork button. And this will create a copy of this repo on our repos. So the name of the repo is going to be GitHub Practice, but that's going to happen for us. And also notice that I'm currently on this repo here, or on this user's repo here, and this is the name of the repo. Whenever I fork this, it's going to transfer it to my repo. It's going to create a copy of it to my repo. So now we can see that changed. Now it's my username / repo name. And now I can see all the code is here. So once we have the repo forked, we want to make sure we have it cloned down. So if you haven't cloned this down yet, you're going to want to do that at this time as well. So to clone down a repo, I'm going to go into my projects folder, and I'm going to open my terminal here. So my terminal's working directory is currently projects, where all of my folders are. And I'm going to say git clone, and I'm going to paste in that link. And it never works whenever I don't do it immediately, so I need to copy that again. And then I'll paste in that link and press enter. Oh, so I already have a folder. I didn't delete it locally. Let me remove that just so I can show you that process again. Let's try that again. If you already have a folder with that name, that's what happens there. It gives you a failed or fatal destination path, and it will say that this already exists and it's not an empty directory. So if a lot of your repo names are like very similar in name, like so I'm using demo 1114, 1113, etc. If I were to create 2 demos and try to clone them together, or clone one down, and I already have a folder called demo 1114, I'm going to get that same error. So that's all that means. So it looks like we have the GitHub practice. So I'm going to cd into that with cd GitHub practice. And then I'm going to use code space period to open my VS Code within that folder. And I'm going to go to index.html. Sorry, for the assignment, we go to readme.md. And for the readme, it says I need to answer these reflection questions. So I'm just going to add those to my file. And then I could answer these here. If you use these asterisks like this, it'll actually create bold around your text. So I could say this is the main tool devs use for version control. You can put whatever makes sense to you. I want you to use your own words when you answer these type of questions. How do local and remote repositories differ? Local is on my computer and remote is on github.com. Okay, so we have some content in here just to see what this kind of looks like. Maybe these can't have spaces. There we go. And that makes that bold. So this is called Markdown. It uses a little bit different syntax than HTML. But if you were to look at this on a web page, like a Markdown file, it would actually all be converted into HTML. So it's fairly similar in that respect, but it's not as powerful as HTML is. Or HTML, you have all the attributes. You can add style tags. You can use HTML directly in a Markdown file, but you don't see that very often. Okay, so we have our answers to the questions. So next thing I need to do is ACP this. And I don't remember which terminal to use, so I'm just going to open a new one. Say git bash. Oh, actually, let me go into the folder and do it. So we're in the GitHub practice folder. I'm going to open my git bash here. And now I'm going to do the ACP process. So for the git add, I'm going to add all files. Git commit-m answer reflection questions within README. And then I'm going to do git push origin main. Okay, so everything is now up to date on GitHub. That was yesterday's assignment, which is forking over a repo to your repo, cloning it down, making those changes, committing those changes, and then pushing those changes back to GitHub. So let's see those changes on GitHub now. And here's my README file being displayed underneath. And it says, utilize this repo for your homework to practice Git forking. So this is just where we answered the questions, and everything seems to be up to date there. So now I'm going to go back to day 2. Staging changes. So take the file that we cloned yesterday and make a modification to it and stage this change. So we created the reflections.markdown yesterday, so let's add to that. Add a good resource you found while learning Git. So here's a good resource we can add. And I'm going to plug that in. So to do a link in Markdown syntax, let me close this little window here. If I put these square brackets, I can type my, basically it's like alt text. It's interesting how this works. So I could place text in here and then link to it, like it's an anchor tag in HTML. So I could say link to Git cheat sheet. And then outside of the square brackets, I can put parentheses. And you can see over here, it created an actual clickable link. And I'll just drop that link right there. And then if I click on this, it actually opens that up. And if you want to get this preview, how I have it, to do that, it's actually up here at the top. So here's my close button. I come down and I look for this little magnifying glass with the split screen right there. I can click that. And if you don't like having this on 2 tabs, you can actually drag this over so it's all on 1 tab. It's basically up to you how you want to lay this out. But this gives you a preview of what the Markdown would look like if it were deployed. It's kind of like your live server, except with Markdown, you don't need to use a live server to view it. Okay, so we have our change. We added a link. So the next step is to ACP our changes. So I'm going to open up my terminal. And I'm going to git add period git commit -m. And I added a link to external source. And then we git push origin main. I got a typo there. There we go. And that's, again, the full ACP process. We made a change to the file. We got it to a stable point where this looks good. Like I look at the preview here, I can see that link is exactly what I want it to be. So now I'm ready to push this code to GitHub. So I added it to staging, I committed it, and then I pushed it to GitHub. Does anyone have any questions about the ACP process? Okay. So I'm going to minimize, and we'll look back at the instructions. So we did the commit. We have our meaningful message. So now we're on to part 2. We pushed our committed change. Push the committed change. I'm sorry. Let me back up here a second. I think I'm getting ahead of the instructions. Write a meaningful commit message. We did that. Okay, so this is the same instructions twice. I'm going to modify these for the future. That way this isn't so confusing. The remote change. After you've pushed your remote change, generate a simple text file in the remote repository. Notice it's saying remote repository. So can someone tell me what that means by remote repository?
That's the one that's in GitHub, not on your computer.
Exactly. And it says to call it this synchronization.txt. So we're going to create a new file directly on GitHub. So to do that, I go to my GitHub and I can see that I'm on the GitHub practice repository on my profile name. And what I want to do now is add a file and hit create new file. And then for name your file, I put in synchronization.txt. Let's see if it says about any content for that. There doesn't appear to be any content requirements for that, so I'm not going to place any content in there. Let me close this extra tab. It's confusing me. All right, so I have the file being created. I'm going to hit commit changes here on GitHub. I'm going to commit directly onto the main branch. This is a decent commit message because there's no content within the file and we're just creating the file. So this commit message makes sense to me. So I'm just going to hit commit. And now we can see that synchronization.txt was created within my GitHub repository. Now, when I look in my VS Code, this is the GitHub practice folder. We can see that that is not here. I can refresh the Explorer. It's not here. Somebody want to tell me how to get my remote changes to my local machine?
Pull, I think.
Yeah, it's pull. So I can do git pull. And we can see that we have a fast forward, meaning we don't have a merge conflict. We have a synchronization.txt, and it added one line. So we have one file changed with one insertion. And I'm not sure what the create mode 100.644 thing is, but we did create the file, and that's what matters. So there we can see the file is created. That looks good. So going back to the instructions, after you've pushed your change, generate a simple text file on the remote. We just did that. Pull the remote change. We did that. Use Git to pull the change you made to remote repository. Make sure that the new file appears in a local repository. So this is where we would write a reflect for the next part. I'm just going to copy this in there to show where that goes. So I'm going to put my day 2. I'll actually put this inside of an H2, say day 2, reflect, paste that in right there. And I'm going to make this reflect bold by putting 2 asterisks on each side of it. Just to kind of show you some more of the syntax you can use. And if we look at the preview, we can see that that was bold now. This is a heading. And then I want to move this link down to day 2 as well. Okay, so there's the link in day 2. There's our reflection. And then I would answer my reflection here. And when I look at my preview, I think this looks pretty good. I got my bold response here. I got my actual reflection. This little piece is bold. This looks pretty good. I think we're at a good point for an ACP process. We haven't added anything into this text file. That's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and start the ACP process. So I'm going to open my terminal, and I'm going to say git add. And this time I'm going to type in the file name just to remind you that you can do one file at a time. Git commit -m add day 2 heading with content. And then I want to push this to my GitHub with git push origin main. Okay, so looking back at the instructions, I thought there was somewhere in here we needed to do a screenshot. This is day 2. After you push to remote, pull the remote. Okay, so it doesn't look like we need a screenshot. Let me check the rubric on that. Nope, it's just this text file. My notes must need change there. If we were going to include a screenshot, I'll just show that real quick. What I would do is I'll go to my README. I'm going to take a screenshot here. I'll do just, I'll do the selector tool. Okay, and now that screenshot, you might have to use your Paint or whatever program to actually paste that in. I can't paste it directly here because it just says image.png. Oh, actually that did work. Wow, I must have added that feature in. Okay, so after I screenshot it, it went into my clipboard and I was able to just paste it right in. So this added an alt text here, and it added the file name. I noticed the file name is the same as over here. So if I wanted to rename this to screenshot, then I need to update this to screenshot. And then we have our alt text. I would say screenshot of Markdown. And we'll take a look at that. And there's my screenshot, my text. So that's all looking pretty good. So now I can ACP this. Now I've done 2 changes here. So I have 2 different files. These are very related changes. So this would be a good time to use the git add period. I'm actually going to do it separately again, just to show you how that work process would be if you do work in multiple files on unrelated things. So I'm going to say git add screenshot.png. And I was able to auto-complete that with the tab key because it's in the same folder that I'm in. And then I'm going to say git commit -m add screenshot to root. And then I want to do another add, git add readme.md, git commit -m add link to image within README. So now that both of those changes are committed, I can now do git push origin main, and those are all headed to GitHub. So let's take a look at GitHub now and see those changes reflected here. So here's the sample README. Notice it doesn't show the Markdown syntax. It's actually showing the finalized version. And here we can see a link to the Git sheet, my reflection with the answer to the reflection, and the screenshot of my VS Code. All of this is attached to the Markdown file. What questions do you have about this? This is the solution code for today's assignment. So if you were able to follow along, you'll be able to submit that at this time and then work on some previous assignments or practicing some of your other techniques, building web applications, maybe work on some CSS, things like that if you're ahead. If you're also wanting to practice more Git, you can start converting all of your previous assignments into Git repositories just to get that practice, work with the ACP process a little bit. I just wanted to get a little bit of extra time in today for anyone who needs to get caught up, and also make today a little bit, or this week a little bit easier than what we've been dealing with the JavaScript and everything we've learned on top of all this. So are there any questions before we begin the assignment for those who need to work on the assignment still? Yes, Crystal.
I last night you mentioned on mine it still says master. How do I change it to main? I'm still kind of stuck on that.
Okay, so that's not a big deal. I will walk you through that as soon as we start the breakout rooms.
Okay.
There's some terminal commands you'll plug in, and it'll make it so all of your future branches are set to main. I don't remember the commands off the top of my head. I actually have to look at the I have a cheat sheet for that, so I'm going to actually start opening that up. But yes, that is a good question. Is there anybody else who has that showing as master branch instead of main? Iris, I see your hand is up. Does yours show master branch?
Yeah, it did
Okay.
earlier.
All right, I'll actually, let me find these instructions real quick, and I'll actually just go through this with everyone here. Just in case anybody else watching the recording who wasn't able to attend today has the same issue. That way we can get that sorted out. Just bear with me 1 second here. There's a lot of, I have this entire like slideshow for setting up the development environment that we don't use anymore. And it's one of the steps in here. All right, I got it. So it's similar to the commands we used for setting up our username and email. So what the command looks like is this. And I'm going to paste this into the chat as well. So all you have to do is git config global, and then when you set init.default branch main. So again, let me paste this into the Slack. I somehow got the letter I in my clipboard. Let me just recopy it. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, and you just paste that in, and it's not going to change your branch name and instantly to main. If you already have a repository that's branch is called master, it's going to continue to be called master until you manually change that. But I can show you how to do that as well. So I'm actually going to go the other direction with this just to show you how you would change it to main, but I'm going to go to master instead. So just do what I'm doing, but type in main where I type in master. So if you need to switch yours over, if you already currently have a repository and you want it to be called main, what you'll do is you'll say git branch, git switch, sorry about that, git switch -c. This is going to create a branch, and then you're going to put in the word main. So that creates a new branch called main. I'm going to put in master because I'm already on the main branch, but make sure you use the word main there. So once you have this created, you can do a git push origin master, except you're going to type in main, not master. And what this does is it creates that branch and it pushes it to GitHub. So the steps are going to be git switch -c space main and git push origin main. And once you put in that initial code, the git config global thing, you should never have to do this again. This is just like a one-time deal. Yes, Crystal.
Do you have to be in? Do you have to be inside of a folder to change that? I'm not sure what happened with mine.
Did you just do the git config global command and you get an error?
I did.
What was the error message you received?
Wait, let me go back to it.
Let me paste it in mine and see. So I don't have any output when I do it on mine. And I believe if I don't put main there, it does return my current configuration.
It says fatal not a Git repository or any of the parent directory.
It shouldn't matter for git config. Is this the command you typed in, git config? Let me highlight it here. Git config -- global.
No, it was the other one. I'll go back and do that.
Yeah, so this command here is for whenever you create new repositories. Every new repository will have a default main branch instead of a master branch. But it doesn't change your current repositories. To change them, you'll have to cd into a current repository that is currently a master branch. Iris, I see your hand up there. Did you have a question too?
Oh, no, I never lowered it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, whichever repository is currently set to master, you'll just need to open that up in your terminal.
Um, hmm. Didn't do anything. It just went to.
When you type in the git config command and press enter, it shouldn't actually respond with anything other than just
Okay.
letting you. Yeah, that's normal.
Okay.
All right, so did you got that command in? So is there a current repository that's set to master that you need to change to main?
Okay, now I'm stuck.
Are you receiving errors or what happened? Are you stuck with?
Well, like you said, it didn't do anything, but I'm kind of stuck on what to do next.
Oh, okay. So the next thing is, you said that you had a repository that was currently set to master, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you cd into that folder or open your terminal within that folder?
Let's see. Mhm. Mm.
While we wait, was there anybody else who had any issues with the branches or anything like that?
I think I got it.
Okay, so does it say how mine is right now with master right after the name of the folders?
Okay, now it's not saying anything. It has the folder there, but it's not saying anything after it.
Does it?
Not sure what I
You're on
did.
Windows, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so if it doesn't say anything after it, then you're probably not inside of a repository currently. I'm assuming that maybe you're in your projects folder.
I think I am.
Okay, so you'll just need to CD into whatever repository is having that issue.
Okay. hmm. Okay, now my mind's going blank. I'm trying to remember how to get to it.
Was it your current assignment you're working on?
No, it was a previous one.
Okay.
But
One nice thing about this is whenever you create your repos using GitHub first and then clone them down, all of them will also be set to main. GitHub uses main by default without you having to configure that. So the only ones that'll have the master branch are the ones that you said get in it originally.
okay, I think I have it. I think I have it. Mm.
Oh yeah, also to add, there is no quiz this week. It'll just be these 5 assignments. Are you still looking for that folder, Crystal?
I think I may have found it.
So you're ready for the commands to convert it?
Let's see. Looks like I closed out of it accidentally. Let me go back. It may take a minute for me to find it.
That's all right. I'm not really going over any new content for the rest of the class at this time. It's basically just working on the assignments.
Okay.
Iris, you said you had the same issue though. Did you get yours to work? Your config command?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have a repo that you needed to convert over to a main?
No.
Okay. So I'm guessing it was just one of your older ones that you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If it's like a previous assignment, it's not a big deal. Just moving forward, making sure you have this git config set up in there, and all your repos in the future will have a main branch by default then. And
Okay.
It's not a big deal if you have one that says master. I will show for anyone watching the recording that needs to convert theirs though, how this process would look. So I had to do it kind of backwards because I created a new branch. I'm going to show this again. I created a new branch called git switch. Git switch will go to a new branch or to any branch. You put this C flag on here and it will create a new branch. And at this time you would put in main. If I hit this now, it's going to throw an error because I already have a main branch. So it says a branch name main already exists. Once you run that though, this should switch to main. So once you do that, you'll do git push origin main. This is also going to fail because I'm currently on the master branch and I don't have any changes to push anyway. I guess I just got everything up to date. But this would be the two commands that you would use. So git switch -c main, git push origin main. And this right here is going to say main whenever this happens. So I'm going to say git switch main so that it's up, everything's up to date now. So the next thing I need to do is delete my master branch off of my machine. So to do that, the command is git branch with a D flag, and then you put in master. So it's git branch D for delete, and then the name of the branch that you want to delete. And it says I deleted branch master, and I'm still on the main branch. I also I reconfigured my GitHub to show you the proper process on how you would change it over. So it says I have two branches currently. If I look at them, I can see my main branch here and my master branch here. And I already set the master as my default so that it would show you the process as if you were having this issue. So currently my master branch is my default branch and my main is a secondary branch, and we can see that listed here. So what I can do is go to settings, and this is on these tabs here at the top. And where it says default branch, I'm going to click these arrows to switch to another branch, click the drop down and switch this to main. And then I'm going to update. This error is referring to whenever we have our web pages deployed using third-party deployment or even GitHub deployment. this would break the deployment if you're deployed off of the master branch. That's what that's warning us about. We don't have it deployed, so that's not an issue. So now we are on the main branch. And now if I go back to my code, we can see that this is set to main. We still have the master here. So I'm going to click on the 2 branches. It's right beside this drop down here. Click these 2. And then right over here, there's a little recycling bin. It says delete master. I'm just going to click on that and it's gone. I did a refresh and now we only have the main branch. Does anyone have any questions about that process? It's a lot of steps just to change that over. But it is good to know in case you do run into an issue where you initialized a repository as a master, you have a lot of good code on it, or maybe you're working on a code base, an older code base for a company, and they want you to convert everything over to being master branches instead of main branches instead of master branches. This is the process for that. I wouldn't expect you to memorize this. There's lots of tutorials on how to do this online. There's YouTube videos that show how to do this. There are blog articles that show how to do this. There's lots of ways you can find this solution. So don't worry if you don't have this memorized on how to delete branches, switch between create and all that right now. It's not a big deal. But if you are in a situation where you don't want to have the master branch, these are the steps you would need to resolve that issue. Does anyone else have any questions about anything at all, about the assignment, about yesterday's assignment, about Git or GitHub, anything? Does anybody want me to go through the workflows again to show like how you would start a new project or anything at all like that? Yes, Elgin.
Yes. What was the markdown file? What was that again?
Are you referring to the readme.markdown file? This one here? Was it the one I was writing the answers in on the assignment? This one here. It has the screenshot in it. I'll just open up the code and show the code on this.
I was reading the assignment and it said create a new markdown file. I was just trying to remember exactly what it was.
Was that the day 1 assignment?
Yes.
Okay, so for the day 1 assignment, let me bring that up. So I'm assuming you forked the repository over, right?
Right.
Okay, so once you have it forked, you cloned it down. After it's cloned, it says create a simple markdown file. In this case, it's saying reflections.md. So all you have to do, which actually I didn't do that, I created a readme.md. So I'll do that now. You just create a new file and you call it reflections.md. And we get the little down arrow there showing that this is a markdown file. Markdown syntax is a little bit weird. I can go through some of this too, just for reference. If you put a hashtag in a space, this will create an H1. So I could say reflection. Oh, I spelled that wrong. And then also when you're in a markdown syntax, let me close these extra tabs. Up here at the top right, there is a split view with a magnifying glass. It says open preview to the side. It looks like we can use Control K to accomplish this as well. So let me press Control K and then V, I think. Yeah. So that's a little bit weird way to do that. But here we can see that I have an H1 that says reflection. And then I could put in those questions, which I have currently in my README file. These are in the instructions. I'm just going to copy these over and paste them in. Also, when you're using Markdown, I believe you can make all of these a 1. Maybe that was HTML that was everything a 1, and it would number it manually. But this uses the number syntax. If I put in a hyphen instead of a number, I get the bullets. So Markdown's, it's easy to use, but it's new syntax, so it's just like an extra little thing. It is good to know, though, because this is how you'll write your documentation. And we're going to go over Markdown more tomorrow. I'm going to go kind of a little bit more in depth on all the Markdown syntax. And it's not like a full-on requirement for Get Week. I just wanted to show you some more of this. That way, when we start actually writing documentation, we're feeling pretty decent about how the syntax is for Markdown. So we have an H1 with a reflection. I can make an H2 and say day 2. If I wanted an H3, I'd put 3 of these. I could say hour 1 or something. An H4. And this just continues on like this. And you can kind of see how this is getting, it starts off real large. And then this one also has the underline there with it. And then it gets smaller and smaller as we go. And I'll go over these again tomorrow. Another one is block quotes. You just put a little arrow like that. So the syntax can be a little cleaner to read. It's a little more human readable than HTML is. But you don't have as much power with it. And so this is basically, when we say Markdown, this is what we're referring to as this stuff here. And then it outputs this over here. Something to add too, this, for anyone who's already done with the assignment, this could be something that you work on. It's actually really, really useful, and it's on GitHub. If you create a new repository on GitHub, that is your username. So if I go to my profile and then my username, this is actually how I did all this little stuff here with like the, this is just Markdown, and it's kind of like a portfolio, but it's just for GitHub. Let me go into the syntax on this. So that little scrolling typing, I actually brought that in from another framework. If anyone wants this, let me know. I can send it to you. You basically just type in your text separated by semicolons, and it gives you that nice little scrolling effect. You can put emojis inside of Markdown. And then I got like an H1 here that says my name, an H2 with my heading, like your headline, like you'd put on LinkedIn, and then about me, experience, and a contact with me. So this is essentially a portfolio on my GitHub so that anyone could go on here and contact me through this. Does anyone have any questions about that? And again, you just create a repo with your name. So whatever your username is. So I'd get a new, and then for me, it's TM-LBENSON. And it says I already have a repository for that, so I wouldn't be able to use that. But this would be how you would actually create that portfolio. So if you do have some extra time, go ahead and take a look at that. There's a lot of templates out there you can use for portfolios and Markdown. So if you just search for one of them, something can come up. And it's good practice just to have a little bit more time on GitHub as well. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yes, Gregory.
Hey, if you don't mind, can you go over today's assignment again?
Yeah, the day 1 or day 2 assignment?
Day 2.
Sure. Do you want to see the code, or what do you want me to show you?
Hold on, let me see. I need the part 1.
All right, the part 1. This is actually the day 1 assignment, the part 1. So you'll have to go to the day 1 assignment and fork the repository, and then add your Markdown file, and then put these questions inside of that Markdown file. Once you have that, we look at part 1 of this here, and it says take the file from your previously forked and cloned repository and make a modification to it. So in order to do part 1, you'll have to do all of yesterday's assignment, which is just forking this repository, cloning it down, and then creating a new file called reflections.md and putting these questions in there and answering these questions. Once you have those, you're done with part 1.
All right.
Does anybody else have any questions? All right, so if there's no more questions for the remainder of class, I am going to open up the breakout rooms. That way you can work. And then if you need any assistance or you're running into any issues, you have any questions, just request me to your room and I'll be able to assist you there. So let me get the breakout room started. I'm also going to stop the recording.